sorry buddy, a co-creator and a teacher and a learner, and inspiring and humbling. It's been phenomenal to watch the science that we've done together, and it's been really exciting to watch how Ash has been weaving together her many different passions and skill sets. So it's an honour to have fun.
Can we do it at the same time?
Oh, yes, please start. Yep.
Hi everyone, and welcome to my thesis. I am so excited to present with you all, and you're going to learn today, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So last semester I was thinking, what should I do for my senior thesis? I was thinking about continuing my RU summer research, where I did Drosophila fruit fly research at UConn. However, my heart wasn't feeling it. Instead, I know based on my own personal experiences and experiences of people in my community and research that there are serious inequities in science. And with the intention of my research, I want to really show how we can move from a rhetoric of diversity to an actual practice of diversity. Now, the title of my presentation is How Can We Begin to Decolonize Biology? I don't know! How can we do it? I really don't know. But seriously, it's a big question. Often when we have scientists going to scientific conferences, we are like, okay, we're gonna set you up and you pose a question and you're supposed to know all the answers. However, in this particular question, I can't have all the answers. This is something that we all need to do together as a community. This is not a singular event. This is something that we all need to work towards for making science a more inclusive process of education. Now, what do I mean when I say decolonize biology? Decolonize biology, really, I don't want to use decolonize frivolously because it's not a metaphor. Really, it's acknowledging that science has played a key role in the development of systems of oppression, and that decolonization is a continuous process. And it's not just me alone, it takes a village, and I encourage you to join me. Now, on this path forward of the road less traveled, it will get uncomfortable, and it will be frightening and scary, and I do urge you to, there will be like trigger warnings for mental health and colonization, also white supremacy, and other egregious forms of violence. However, it will be enlightening for all of us. And in this path forward, I urge you to consider my background, case studies, my theoretical framework, methodology, discussion, and also my conclusion. Now for background, science reflects human culture, as evidenced with Copernicus in his theory that the sun and all the planets revolve around the sun. He didn't publish his research until after his death because he was fearful that the church wouldn't believe his theory. The church at the time believed that the earth was at the center of the universe. However, we know that is false. Even though this is a historical example, we need to look to it as showing how science reflects human culture. In addition, scientific practices are highly colonized because science and colonization are one and the same. It's very intermeshed, and yet scientists are rarely examining their roles in oppression. For example, using terms like objectivity really is harming because one could not be a cool, calm, and detached scientist while Negroes were lynched, murdered, and starved. W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, one key component in science is the idea of eugenics. Eugenics was the movement that the fittest in society should be selectively breed for quality. This idea is actually an extension of Darwin's theory of natural selection, that the fittest should continue to be passed down into future generations. And what is really a key component in eugenics is the elimination of individuals that are seen as undesirable, as defective, as criminals, feeble-minded, and insane. And we probably can assume what type of individuals are deemed those labels. Those who are marginalized or are seen as abnormal. And the idea of colonization and white supremacy is that there is a binary between abnormal and normal. And those who are under the dominant structure are normal, and those who are more marginalized are abnormal. Now, my first case study we'll look at is the Tuskegee syphilis study. It was conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service, and it involved 600 black men. In this study, they were recruiting these black men to treat bad blood. However, in response, the main purpose of this was that scientists wanted to see how syphilis progressed in the black body if it was left untreated. They intentionally withheld really useful medicine from these individuals to see how this study could be used. So the experimentation on black bodies like lab rats is completely unacceptable, and the impact of this is that there is a severe distrust in the scientific community because of this egregious act of violence. The second case study that we'll examine is the forced sterilizations on Puerto Rican women. In 1933, Puerto Rico has experienced a lot of colonization at this point, where they were trying to create a monoculture system where only sugar was produced. Even though Puerto Rico has a vast variety of crops they could produce, the U.S. influence on Puerto Rico was that they should only produce sugar. As a result, a lot of the agricultural farmers were displaced, and there was more increasing poverty in Puerto Rico. To control the population, the government made sterilizations free and legal in Puerto Rico for women, and scientific organizations and even Planned Parenthood supported these sterilizations to protect the capital earnings and holdings in the island colony. And unfortunately, by 1965, approximately 34%, or more than 1/3, of these women who were of childbearing age had been sterilized. The relation to the last case study that we looked at was again lack of informed consent, which is an environmental justice issue. And really, the lack of informed consent is evidenced by the idea that these women didn't know that they were even being sterilized. They thought that these sterilizations were temporary, not permanent. And it's really disheartening to see that this happened, but the sterilizations is not something of the past, because even in 2010, women in California prisons were sterilized. And for a continuation of this, these are key examples of how these past events aren't really in the past. And then also, even though I showed you really overt forms of racism and colonization, it also shows that these have really big impacts. The legacy of this continues on, and as a result, many people are not willing to engage in science if they come from a marginalized background, and when we do, we face a lot of backlash in the form of covert white supremacy. Now, my theoretical framework is intersectionality, which examines how systems of oppression compound and overlap based on social determinants. Social determinants are all the ones listed around. And intersectionality as a theory, for me, is the study of how power structures interact in the lives of individuals who have marginalized identities. So for my methodology, I am using autoethnography. Now if we break up the word autoethnography, auto meaning self, ethno meaning the socio-cultural interaction, and graphy meaning the application of the research process. Autoethnography offers a way of giving voice to personal experiences for the purpose of extending sociological understanding. Now, I have many different intersectional identities, so I really like that these really could showcase as a person who is Filipinx, queer, non-binary, and hearing impaired, that my research and my stories are matter and that they should be considered scholarly research. Now for the discussion, in cis-het white ableist-centered classrooms, the effects of it, the effects it has on students like me is that there's a lack of belonging. Oftentimes when I'm in the classrooms, I don't feel like I belong, whether it is learning the history of old white dudes and scientists, or only looking at studies featuring female and male binary. I really, it's really frustrating to feel like I belong and that I should continue doing science even though I'm incredibly passionate about it. So the sense of belonging is something that I'll talk about later. In addition, with my hearing impairment, usually when people look at me, they don't assume that I have a hearing impairment. It's an invisible disability. However, I also use this assisted listening device in classes. Basically, the professor wears a mic, and then I hear their voice louder through my headphones, as depicted in this image. This device makes my disability highly visible, and as a result, I am often faced with the gaze, the Medusa gaze that students impart on me at the beginning of class because they see me with a disability and they just stare. But like it's funny, but it's also showing how these systems are showing that I'm not normal. And so last semester I wanted to try a little experiment. What would happen if I didn't wear my assisted listening device for a whole semester? Because I wanted to be perceived as a normal student. It taught me 3 things. 1, I will never be normal, and I love it. Normal is a fantasy that is impossible to achieve. It's a fantasy that the dominant culture creates to differentiate who is normal and who is abnormal. 2, I couldn't hear well. Like I couldn't because I didn't have my thing to help me. But like I was chasing after normalcy because I wanted to be that normal student, but really it was hindering myself from learning to my full potential. And 3, the onus is on me to advocate for myself and people with disabilities always. And lastly, it's gonna get pretty heavy. But I want to talk about this one experience that happened yesterday because the scientific process is always changing and growing. But one of my dear friends told me that she thinks I'm confident, and to disclose, she identifies as a QPOC, queer trans person of color. And yes, at times I am confident, but it often feels like a mask. My mental health is constantly challenged. I have depression and anxiety, and I also found the timing ironic because how could she, my good friend, believe that I'm confident when just yesterday I was crying to my therapist with a cacophony of really dark, sad thoughts and just really negative internalized thoughts that I'm a bad biology student. I'm a helpless, worthless cause. And why am I even still trying? And maybe she thinks I'm confident because I always shine in my ethnic studies classes. I have a real sense of community there, and I know that I'm valued. And I don't feel that confidence in biology and science. Another barrier for underrepresented students is that the feeling of not belonging transforms into internalized thoughts from white supremacy. When I fail, I see that as me failing. I'm a failure. But when in reality, it's actually a reflection that the systems are not built for someone like me. I'm not meant to survive with all my intersectional identities in this colonial, covert system in science. So, to conclude, scientists have played an active role in the development and sustenance of colonialism and white supremacy. Intersectionality is a strong analytical lens to understand how scientific practices perpetuate the overlapping systems of oppression. And through vulnerable storytelling, autoethnography allows researchers to examine how their stories are not isolated and fit within a larger story of injustice. And basically, my story matters, it's important research, and thank you all for listening. These are all the acknowledgements, so y'all can read it while I go through questions.
We have about 2 or 3 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
So, first thing, what evidence would you give for modern, for modern examples as to how science is influenced by culture?
Yeah, modern examples about science is influenced by culture. One being that